Okay. Well, we are live right now, and we have with us on this legislative forum right now two of our representatives. I'm expecting a few more people to show up, but if we only have Representative Fugate and Representative Wolfley on the call, then we'll still have a good conversation about legislative issues surrounding education, and and go from there. I'll start with Representative Fugate, who you can see on the screen. Representative Wolfley has called into this forum. And Representative, if you'll just give a brief introduction of yourself and kind of maybe your overview of what you think this legislative session is going to be like, then I think that's a good place for us to start.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Cobb and President Porter. It's good to be here this morning. I'm a proud product of the Mid-Del Public Schools, 1984 graduate of Del City High School. Mr. Porter was my vice principal when I was a junior high over at Kerr, so this is home for me. I spent 6 years on the Mid-Del Public Schools Foundation, working to raise funds for our public school teachers, and I'm a very, very proud advocate of what we do in our public schools. My wife's a public school teacher over at Parkview Elementary, and so I don't know if she's watching this morning or not. I think she's supposed to be, so. In terms of the legislative session, it's going to be kind of interesting. The numbers that we're hearing from the Board of Equalization are interesting. They certified a smaller number for us in terms of what we could budget in terms of revenues, but then there are one-time dollars that are available to us that may make things a lot more palatable for us. And so the interesting questions I think this session will relate to how we spend the money and how we deal with COVID in the state of Oklahoma. So.
Okay, Representative Wolfley, same thing. I'll let you introduce yourself and give your outlook as a freshman member of the House of Representatives.
Well, okay. I taught Carl Albert Junior High for 30 years and then Carl Albert Senior High for 10 years. Currently, my youngest son's a senior there. My wife taught Del City Elementary for 6 years, and trying to think anything else. We've got 8 kids total, 2 boys, 6 girls, and committee-wise out here, I'm on the Wildlife Committee, the Elections and Ethics Committee, the General Government Committee, and the subcommittee on Common Ed appropriations, and which actually meets in just a little while here, so I won't be able to stay on real long. But yeah, as far as what's good, it's new to me, so I'm not real sure exactly where we are. I hear one day you hear one thing that the budget doesn't look that bad, and then you hear but that's because it's not that different from last year, but that's because we used some one-time funds last year. And so anyway, so it's all kind of remains to be seen. A lot of things are just kind of needing to be sorted out right now.
Okay, and that's what I'm hearing too. I've heard a lot of different outlooks on the budget, and policy wise, I'm not sure what's down the pike. We'll have a conversation about that, but I think the budget is going to be at the forefront, just as it is every year of every conversation. Every policy decision has some kind of a fiscal impact. For anybody following along and watching us on YouTube or tuning in later to watch on YouTube, one thing that I want to show you that we have that is just a good resource for our community. We've added to our website a legislative page that shows our legislative goals, and we'll discuss those shortly. Contact information for our congressional delegation, as well as our delegation in the Oklahoma House of Representatives and the Oklahoma Senate. We have a total of 11 reps and senators from the legislature whose boundaries overlap with part of Mid-Del's boundaries. Some of them they just touch a tiny portion of our boundaries, but they still represent some of the students that we serve. And when you reach out to any of these representatives or senators, you just let them know that, you know, you're reaching out as somebody who's an interested party, from Mid-Del Public Schools, and that they represent part of the district. I should mention that not everybody is able to come today, and we had more people who had confirmed that they would be here, and then ended up not being able to join us for a variety of reasons. A lot of it is just that they confirmed they would come, and then leadership in the House or Senate may have called them into meetings. So, again, and I would not be surprised if some more people join us in the call shortly. I want to get to our legislative goals really quickly, and I don't want to belabor those. Our board adopts a set of legislative goals every year, and this year is no different. And a lot of the legislative goals are no different. We look at the list that we have every year, and we try not to merely recycle our legislative goals, but at the same time, some of them are aspirational and things that haven't been achieved yet and that we haven't quit aspiring for. First is that we would like to see the development of a sustainable plan to increase funding. We always compare ourselves to other states in the region, and for as long as I've been in education, which is since 1993, we've been behind most of the other states. We made a significant increase in investment 3 years ago, and another investment the next year. But the state's economy ebbs and flows maybe harder than most other states do. Number two, ongoing full funding of health insurance for certified and support staff. I think that's really one of the most important benefits that we provide to our employees, and that comes straight from the legislature. Number three, protecting teacher retirement system as a defined benefit plan. Again, having that defined benefit plan is one of the things that really, I think, attracts people into the profession, or at least keeps them here. Number four is the belief that all schools receiving public funding, including those that benefit from tax credits and publicly funded scholarships, should be subject to the same accountability measures as all schools. Number five, the development of a student weight in state funding for full-time virtual students. Some states already have a provision like this in place, and I think that there's a model out there for us. Number six, legislation that will give school districts an equal voice with city and county governments in the development and approval of TIF districts. Number seven, opposing legislation that would basically diminish local control. Number eight, supporting legislation that allows school districts to enter into partnerships with higher ed institutions, basically helping us redefine high school. Number nine, we believe that there are legislative priorities that could help us with the teacher shortage. Most importantly, or most immediately anyway, I don't know if it's the most important one, is to help teachers who are certified in other states immediately be eligible to teach in Oklahoma without a lot of red tape. And then also to help teachers who are retired immediately return to schools if they choose to do that. Number 10, very simply, we oppose voucher legislation. Number 11, we oppose the expansion of tax credits and other such measures. And number 12, this is a new one for us this year. It's one of the first questions I have for you as well. We support the adoption of permanent rules that allow for virtual meetings of school boards and other public bodies in case of public emergencies. It was clunky at first when we had virtual public meetings, virtual school board meetings last spring, wasn't it, Mr. Porter?
Oh, a whole lot.
And then we got better at it. And then we stopped doing it because it also really eliminates the opportunity for public participation. And as much as I don't always love what I hear at public participation, I think it's important. But in the future, it's not. It's an option that needs to be on the table for all of us, and I would hope that the legislature will will help us with that. We asked staff members. We sent out a survey last week and asked staff members to submit questions, and we got a few, and we added some of our own over here as well. So again, when you're answering these questions, Representative Fugate and Representative Wolfley, just think about these are probably coming from Mid-Del teachers and staff. The first question I have, and very simply, what are your priorities for the upcoming session, and how has the pandemic changed those priorities? And I'll start with you, Representative Fugate.
Well, thank you. So I think top of mind for all of us is addressing one of the issues on the legislative priorities for Mid-Del, and that is implementation of permanent rules for virtual meetings and enabling the continuation of what we've all discovered and figured out how to do, just like we're doing. I do expect that we'll have some legislation in front of the governor by mid-February. And so, it takes a little time because of the way the Constitution requires certain things to happen for the legislature, but that'll be fast-tracked. In terms of my own legislative priorities, I have a couple of things that are related to government efficiency and improvement. One of the key things I think that relates to Mid-Del Public Schools is I've introduced House Bill 1853, which would make the state of Oklahoma responsible for filling any of the missing federal impact aid as it relates to public schools. And so, I see your expression there, Mr. Porter. That's a big ask, especially in a tough budget year, but it's the right thing to do for Mid-Del Public Schools and our kids. And when we're losing, $6 million or so a year, we have a wonderful resource with Tinker. And there's no denying it's the economic engine, certainly for our area and perhaps for the state of Oklahoma, but it also hurts us. And so it's time for the state of Oklahoma to help us make sure that our kids are being treated the same way kids across the state are. And it's a shame, unfortunately, that our federal congressional delegation won't do anything to change that. When you've got the Senator Inhofe, who is the chairman of the Senate Armed Forces Committee, he's in the position to actually do something about that, and to this point he hasn't. So it's time for us on the state level to step up to that. I do have another education-related issue as it relates to vouchers. The Opportunity Scholarships process today has a needs-based component that I think is completely out of whack. I'll give you an example of that. The governor's family, mom and dad and 6 kids, can make $245,000 and qualify as needy. I'll say that again, $245,000 a year. We could give the guy a $100,000 pay raise and he would still qualify, his kids would qualify as being needy and eligible for a scholarship. So the change I requested was to align Opportunity Scholarships and the need-based component with what we already do today for college scholarships through Oklahoma's Promise, and that is a $60,000 threshold. Yeah. And it would also require kids every year to come back and qualify again. I'm hopeful that I can get some support. So, I've reached out to Senator Standridge about this last session, and I'll continue to see if I can get him to jump on board with this. I know he's interested in going a little different direction with vouchers. But I had a doorstep conversation with the good senator when he was first running, talking about his concerns about free and reduced lunches and how much money was being spent there. And it just seems to me like we're being much more, profligate in how we spend or how we allow those dollars to be spent for Opportunity Scholarships. So.
Have you touched base with Lawton and Enid and McAllister on your bill for the funding?
For impact aid? Had some conversations with Daniel Pay, who's my colleague out in the Lawton area, and that's the furthest it's gone so far. It's frankly going to be a multi-year process. It's not something I'm expecting this year to happen, but this is a marker that I've put down that we'll continue to come back to in hopes that the federal government will live up to their end of the bargain.
All right. Representative Wolfley, same question. What are your priorities for the upcoming legislative session, and how has the pandemic perhaps changed those priorities?
Well, one of the things I would have liked to have been a priority, just saying, it relates to one of your questions further down the line there about should the state fund health insurance for the dependents of educators and support personnel. And I'm thinking absolutely they should. And it's not budget wise and all. It's probably not a good year to propose something that's an added expense, but just makes no sense to me that support personnel and teachers don't get that benefit when others do. And one of the we're trying to recruit teachers. So one of our selling points is supposed to be sure that your spouse has a job that actually offers these benefits for your children. That doesn't apply. The health choice is as I understand it, it's a self-funded insurance program by the state, which means when their costs go too high, then they pass them on. They pass them on and increase premiums. Well, the members' benefits are all paid by the state, teachers and state employees. So all those, if they want extra money, it has to come from the dependents. And so state employees pay 25% of that. Teachers and support personnel pay 4 times as much to pump money back in to level out the system. So that one, I don't know that it'll go anywhere this year, but I'm definitely on board with that. Another one, I've had teachers ask me about waiving testing. So I just got off the phone this morning with the State Department of Education, and I'm sure you know more than I do on that. But they tell me that that's one of your further questions. But they tell me that that's a function of at the federal level, whether or not it can actually be waived, and they were saying to me that they can't be proactive. They have to wait until the situation presents itself. But that they did at least tell me that they've already voted to not include that they want the testing just for the data. I don't know how that lines up with what y'all are thinking, but they said they have already made a decision not to include that on the report card. Where do y'all stand on that? Would y'all rather not test at all, or do y'all want the data? I've talked to teachers who think they've had less time to prepare this year than they did last year, and last year they waived the test.
I appreciate you asking the question back at us, and Max, you're getting ahead of my questions here, but it's okay. My thought on testing, I've always had a very tormented relationship with state testing, because I'm somebody who likes the data, but I also like to feel like the data means something. This year, I don't feel like that data is going to tell us anything that we don't already know. We do internal testing and to help us understand what our students can and can't do. The state testing process is extremely expensive. The fact that the State Board of Education voted to not include this year's testing results in accountability reports is great. But if you look at the time and effort that goes into the state testing process, not to mention the money that goes into it, since the data is not going to have a lot of meaning, I hate to lose that instructional time. I hate to have people put in the labor for something that's not going to yield useful data. And the State Department of Education likes to respond back with saying that that's it's a civil rights issue. And while I agree that in a global sense, student testing helps us understand where our underserved populations are and how well we are trying to help them, I don't feel like this year really helps paint a meaningful piece of that picture. And so I would prefer to not have the process happen at all if we have a way to not have it happen at all. That's just my take on it. The State Department of Education has certainly heard my take on it, and they've heard from other superintendents who feel the same way. Mr. Porter, would you have something you'd like to add to that?
There's a lot of time that teachers will lose in the classroom because of preparation for testing. And if it's not something that's going to be used, for evaluation, and I would ask that they waive the whole thing for this year, because we need that extra class time because we're losing class time.
Absolutely. Good point. Yeah. The preparation for testing and the time of testing, all that stuff just consumes a huge amount of time. So yeah, good input. Thank you.
Can I dovetail on what Representative Wolfley was just saying? Rick, I think you said it, use the word meaningful. Any testing that we mandate should be meaningful to classroom teachers. That's the most important place where I think that information should be used. And if it's not, we shouldn't be doing it. And I think it's a little interesting to hear the State Department of Education saying that they have to wait for something to happen on waivers when we're seeing other states already applying and receiving waivers. So I'm not sure what's different about Oklahoma that makes us have to wait.
All right. The next question that I sent you all was
Have we had somebody else join us? I see an S on phone.
That's Scott Paul. He's our
Okay,
technology department helping us simulcast this to YouTube, because I think we all know that's not something that I can do myself.
Okay.
Let me make sure I get the right slide. Okay. So the next question was going to be about public bodies holding virtual meetings during times of emergency. And I think that we've already covered that. And I do believe that there's momentum on both sides of the aisle in both chambers for doing that. And again, I think you've got to amend the Open Meetings Act to do that. I should mention, by the way, that the reason we don't have all 5 board members on the screen right now is that we did not want to inadvertently violate the Open Meetings Act, even though we're not really having a board meeting. And so the rest of our board is watching on our YouTube channel, but I thought having our board president included could speak. And Mr. Porter is also our legislative liaison from the board. The next question that we want to ask.
Well, let me interrupt you real quick. I'm going to have to leave and go to a budget meeting for education. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this. And did you say this would be recorded and available to view later?
Yeah, this is on our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and type in Middale Public Schools, then it's on there. But Max, okay. I appreciate it and look forward to getting to know you better and working with you in this session.
See you down the road.
Okay, we'll see you. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. All right, Representative Fugate, you have the floor. In spite of our state's financial challenges, how can Oklahoma improve support for public schools as we continue to pursue funding education at a level similar to neighboring states?
Well, that's kind of 2 different questions, and I'm going to apologize. I must have missed the communication with the questions in advance.
That's okay.
I'm shooting a little from the hip here, but I will tell you that I look at it as 2 different components. 1, how can we support classrooms and teachers? And 2, how can we get the appropriate funding? The last numbers I saw show us we're still about $1,100 per pupil behind other states. And so if I look at Del City High School, for instance, that's $1.5 million that we could be investing in the new teachers or additional classroom supports. All of the things that teachers would like to have to be successful. And we're shortchanging ourselves, we're shortchanging our kids and our future in the state of Oklahoma. But that's the financial side of it. To me, there's also another side of it, and that is talking about the respect that teachers deserve in the classrooms. And I get frustrated with some of my colleagues up here at the Capitol who continue to go back and try to dictate to teachers what needs to happen in their classroom without having meaningful conversations. And most importantly, listening, asking what it is that teachers want, teachers need. It goes back to, for instance, the question we were just talking about with testing. I have yet to hear a classroom teacher say, man, I want to have more testing from the state of Oklahoma. It just doesn't happen. What we hear about is the challenges of having to prepare for testing, the amount of time it takes, and the reality is that the data that comes back is not useful to a teacher. So why do we do that, right? Well, frankly, I'm a little bit cynical perhaps, but I think part of that testing equation is used to bash public schools. And it's a respect issue. And it's time for us here at the Capitol to respect education for what it does for the future of our state.
I will just add this, since we don't have a full roundtable here, I'll just add my thought on testing. Since the beginning of No Child Left Behind almost 20 years ago, all the money, all the billions of dollars that this country has poured into testing has benefited the testing companies, and that's about it.
Exactly.
I mean, I hate to be that blunt about it. There are times that we have data that is meaningful and that helps us, but it's been a in my opinion, it's been a series of policy misfires. So in a year in which instructional time has really suffered anyway, throwing testing on top of it really isn't helpful. All right,
let me say one other thing, and I'm saying this to all the teachers and all faculty who are watching. I am committed to trying to find ways to help you be successful in the classroom, period. So if there's something that you see that needs a statutory change, I would like to hear it so we can work on it, we can get it fixed.
Our next question that we have, what are your thoughts on legislative options for increased oversight of virtual charter schools? Representative Fugate, you have the floor.
So Representative Sheila Dills has been taking the lead on crafting additional statutory language to put greater transparency on our virtual schools. I will tell you, I'm appalled that we have the state's now largest school district with the ability to divert 10% of all state monies to a for-profit management company that has zero management responsibilities contractually, and millions and millions and millions of dollars set aside in a learning fund process that is completely opaque. Those are public dollars. They should be available for review. If we're spending public dollars, they should be used for the betterment of our kids, not, back to the napkin calculations. Epic Youth Services, which is jointly owned by two people, that's the for-profit management company for Epic Charter, will get $31 million this year. That's two people who will get $31 million. If you look at the state appropriations going to the various school districts, there's about 147 school districts. If you combined all of the state funding they receive, in total, it's less than the $31 million that those two gentlemen will receive. It's a scandal. It's obscene. And so I'm committed to find ways to put transparency in that. I'm not saying that we need to put Epic Charter out of business. So I think there's a place for virtual instruction. I see districts across the state of Oklahoma. I know Mid-Del is, fast and furious into virtual instruction. It's certainly one of the tools available. My concern is making sure that people are not taking unfair advantage of it, and that we make sure that we maximize the dollars so that they go to instruction for kids.
Mr. Porter, do you have anything you want to add on that?
I just don't understand why our state doesn't have the authority to force Epic to do what they need to be doing. You read the paper and what does it say? There's a stalemate. So Epic doesn't have to pay $11 million for whatever. And they've got two lawsuits, Epic seems to be just snubbing their nose at the state of Oklahoma and not helping us in any way to rectify the problem.
I'd add on that I don't feel like it's just about Epic. Even before we knew about the investigation, because I don't want to just pile on one school district, there were questions about how virtual schools should be funded, whether they should be funded at the same weight as traditional brick and mortar schools. And I think that we've seen this year of all years that virtual charters provide a service that parents want. So it's not for me, it's not about attacking, the individual entities. Although the 10% for the learning fund and the for-profit management of any school concerns me too. I think that making sure that everybody operates within the law and then making sure that the laws make sense is always something that can be looked at more closely.
I did have a piece of legislation I introduced this session that deals with the oversight process for sponsoring organizations. And the basic premise is this. Beginning in year 4 of a chartered school, we evaluate the progress. We use the A to F report card since that's what the state has determined is an appropriate measure. And if a school gets a D or an F, then the sponsoring organization that's supposed to be providing oversight loses 1 full percentage point of the dollars that they receive. So they can receive a maximum of 3% of state funding. And each year in which the school underperforms, it goes down by another point until it's 0, at which point then we cancel the ability for that organization to sponsor. And, conversely, if the school goes back up to an A or a B school, then those percentages go back up. But it's time for those sponsoring organizations to really do the oversight that's necessary to make sure those charters are being successful.
And I agree with that. If you're going to sponsor a charter school, you should be providing more oversight to them as well. Again, let me go back. I think we inadvertently covered the question about testing that that we were going to have. And the next question on here is, what would your thoughts be on pausing state testing this year due to the way the school year is? Oh, that was the testing one. What are your thoughts on tax credit programs to fund private school tuition? And should private schools receiving those credits be subject to increased oversight from the state? Representative Fugate.
I'm not a fan of the tax credit process that we have in place. Quite frankly, what we do is we take taxpayer money to subsidize what is effectively a private school discount, masquerading as a scholarship. When they call them scholarships, then everybody gets excited and thinks, oh, well, my kid gets a scholarship, they're going to be able to attend this private school. Well, no, generally speaking, it's about a 15% discount. So if you're looking at, say $11,000 in tuition to go to Bishop McGinnis High School, well, you're going to get $1,500. You're still going to have to pony up $9,500 for your kid to go to that school. Is that a choice for people? No. All we're doing is subsidizing an increase in tuition for those schools. It's a reality that I think won't go away in the state of Oklahoma. And so that's why my take on it is, if we're going to have those things in place, and I say that because there are enough of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who firmly believe that that's the way to go. So my take on it then is to try to make sure that the dollars that are being spent over there are used to make sure that those kids who really, really desperately could use that will be able to take advantage of it. When almost half the kids who receive a private school voucher wouldn't qualify for free milk at a school, we have a problem. They don't need that money.
Unfortunately, I see it possibly legislation to increase it.
There was a real push the last 2 years. Senate Bill 407 would have taken the $3.5 million that's available today and boosted it to $30 million. So almost a tenfold increase. That's likely to come up again, but there's kind of an interesting coalition there. There are a lot of rural districts where the members are looking at each other and saying, how does this help me at all? I think the number is 43 counties in the state of Oklahoma do not have a private school available to them. So over half of Oklahoma doesn't have a private school at all. There is no choice there. The right choice for us as legislators is to provide quality public education in every single zip code in the state of Oklahoma. It's our responsibility from the Constitution.
No, I certainly can't argue with that. Let's go to the next question. And Representative Wolfley mentioned that this is one of his legislative goals that probably won't have a lot of opportunity this year because it's involved with it. But should the state fund health insurance for the dependents of educators the way it does for other state employees?
Short answer is yes. The long answer is it won't happen. and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but when you're talking about roughly 90,000 employees between certified staff and support staff, the price tag on that becomes well over $1 billion. We only appropriate $3 billion today, so we're talking about a 25% increase. But what I have started doing, I had a good conversation with the speaker about an idea, and I want to just float it past you all. Midwest City has a trust hospital, the Midwest City Regional, and there are 43 trust hospitals across the state of Oklahoma. Those trust hospitals were all created with public dollars through ad valorem taxes, with the charge that they are to provide services to the community. And it was originally indigent services for the community. Well, I think we could leverage what we have today through the trust hospital network to provide health care for public schools. So for teachers and family, to do that at no cost or very low cost. And that might be a way for us to handle the issue of the cost of benefits by taking advantage of something that already exists today. Now, there was a point in time in Oklahoma's history where we led the nation in what would be effectively socialized medicine. It was in the early 40s when we established the Trust Hospital Network to provide care for those people who didn't have access, who couldn't afford to go see a doctor. And then in 1966, the year I was born, Oklahoma was one of the very first states to adopt Medicaid. And today every state in the United States participates in Medicaid, but it's an optional program. We chose to do it because we believed in trying to invest in the health of our people. I wish I could tell you that we had $1 billion to cover health insurance for all of our dependents. My wife and I looked at it very closely. When I was elected, do we use my insurance? Do we use hers? And the reality, I'll go back to something that Representative Wolf was talking about. My understanding is a little bit different. So when we sign up for insurance, we have a benefit subsidy that's available to us. And traditional state employees and legislators are part of that pool. We get about $1,700 a month that we can spend to choose, I want health insurance, I want life insurance, I want this and that. And for teachers, I think that number is closer to $600. So it will subsidize the cost of a single teacher. But if teacher has kids, it doesn't cover dependent costs. It's just not enough.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations we have with employees, and every year when they look at the benefits option, when we are doing our enrollment period, we have a lot of employees who really struggle when it comes to covering dependents. And honestly, I think that is something that I think it still provides a limitation on getting people to stay in the teaching profession. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of reasons, but
the teacher pay raise had a perverse effect, I think, in some cases where we had teachers who got a pay raise and were no longer qualifying for public assistance for their kids. And so, while we were trying to do a good thing, we wound up not doing a good thing. And it's because we don't think about sometimes the impact of how we spend our money at the state level.
I think you're absolutely right on that. And yeah, I'll let you have the last word on that. Next question. There's an error in sharing my screen. Let me try this again. Next question. How will you support the autonomy of local school boards to make decisions at the local level?
I will fight tooth and nail. I tease people out at the Capitol that I'm a barking chihuahua out there. I'm going to grab you by the pant leg and shake. I don't have a big stick, although I am the minority caucus floor leader this year. So I'll be in a leadership position on the floor. And I am committed to doing everything I can to maintain local control, not just for our school districts, but for our city councils as well. It makes me scratch my head to look at my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who continue to talk about local control. My interpretation of what they mean by local control is it's the control that's closest to them instead of being closest to the people. You know, school boards do a very, very effective job of managing what they have. And I'm not in favor of taking away any capability that school boards have.
You know, go ahead, Mr. Porter.
Well, we've got a board member that's having to run for re-election now, and this is the first time it's really hit us. He thought in February he would have to worry about it, but there are just two of them, so they went to the finals in April, and that's because when I ran it was in March. So watching the changes in when we can have bond elections and stuff, they've really kind of curtailed some of that for us. So we need to really watch that they don't go in and curtail some more, because you know, it's getting rough enough.
There is a bill that's pending out there that would try to move school board elections to general elections, which would just be a disaster.
It would kill us, and especially on bond issues.
Yeah.
Well, the point, the observation I'll make about that, when we ran the $130 million bond election in 2017 in October, it passed with 75% support, and you have to hit 60% to pass a bond. This spring, we planned on running an $11 million bond election in April. It was pushed back because of the pandemic to June, and it happened to fall on the general election date. And I forget exactly, but we cleared 60. We got to 62, 63%, which is great. But as those results were coming in, Mr. Porter, I don't think I'm the only one who feels this way. A little more nervous that night, weren't you?
You aren't just whistling Dixie.
Yeah.
Well, if you take a school board member, you know, in a legislative race, you'll spend $40,000 to $100,000. I'm on the very low end side of it, you know. But even with that, you still have people who walk into the ballot box who don't know who you are, and so they just pick somebody. And now think about that for a school board member. You know, school board races oftentimes are, you know, maybe a tenth the size of a legislative race. They don't have the ability to raise the kind of money necessarily to get name recognition out there. So you're going to wind up with thousands of people walking into to vote who are just guessing, and we don't want that.
Well, and if they're not informed, it's harder to get people to vote yes if they don't know. And I mean, I think there's a reason that traditionally city and school board elections have been on separate dates, as well as their bond proposals, whether it's a city or a school one. Let me ask you this. This is not one of the questions that we have. I've seen some press coverage of people who are looking to create some kind of a measure for recall elections for school board members. Do you think that has any juice? Do you think that's going anywhere, or do you think that's just some people, you know, pounding their fist into the air?
Well, I wish Representative Wolfley were on the call still, because that's a great question. It'll flow through one of his subcommittees that he's on. To me, if we're going to have a recall process, it should start with us. You know, the fact that the people of Oklahoma can do just about anything through initiative petition, except recall a governor, except recall a state legislator, we need to fix that before we start talking about school board members.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I don't think that anybody who's elected is above reproach, and the process that will shape out in the next few months with our board election is the process that's supposed to happen. And you know, it's part of the democratic, you know, process that we have set up in this country and in the state. And I'm glad to see it go forward. Recall elections, I struggle with the concept of them on any level, just because that's what scheduled elections are for in my mind. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there, because again, I think there are people who want to push for that, but that's what every single school board election is for.
Well,
School board members basically are elected volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
We get such a great salary for what we do.
You have that lanyard that's around your neck, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it.
Full disclosure,
Closing the schools.
I did run a bill in the last legislature to do a recall for statewide officials. I couldn't get any traction on it, so.
Well, I feel like your priorities are correct. I'm not a giant fan of recall processes in general, but if it's going to be available at the local level, it should be available at the state level too as a recourse. All right, the next question. Would you consider removing the limits on retired educators returning to the classroom as a way to help curb the teacher shortage? Right now, it's teachers have to sit out or they have to face a reduction in retirement benefits to stay in the classroom. And honestly, the teacher shortage continues to be a problem, and this is one remedy that seems to be available.
That's a tough one for me. I'm cautious about double dipping or effectively double dipping by receiving both salary and retirement income for doing a job that I had previously just left. So there's that concern, and there's also concern about impact to the teachers' retirement system. With somebody coming in and picking up another 3 years worth of, effectively what might be a higher salary. But the reality is we are desperate right now to get people in classrooms. And so I'm going to vote for anything I think will help us get teachers into classrooms. Qualified teachers. Let me say that. Qualified teachers. I don't want a warm body in a classroom. And I believe very strongly in the kinds of teacher preparation that we do in the state of Oklahoma. There's a reason why other states come to Oklahoma to poach our teachers. We know how to do more with less than anybody else in the nation. And we have some great teacher training going on here in Oklahoma. So, the sad reality though, even with the pay raises we had over the 2 years and 3 years ago, and we had substantial pay raises, we have more teachers who are certified who choose to not teach than we have people in our classrooms who are certified. And those teachers have said to us, you cannot pay me enough to work under the conditions that you, the legislature, have created for us in our classrooms. We need to fix that.
I think that's a good point. And a point that I've made for years about school choice is similar. That I know parents who have chosen to take their kids out of public school and move them into private school just because of what some of the mandates on public schools are and the way that frustrates certain families. So, private schools aren't subject to the curriculum standards that we have. And I think our state has good curriculum standards. They're not subject to testing, and you know how I feel about testing. There are a lot of things that the legislature or even the Congress has created, or the U.S. Department of Education has created that define the way we run public schools that are different than they were 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, or 28 years ago when I started. And there are a lot of those changes that never would have happened if local control were more of a reality. So.
Okay, you spent time listening to teachers instead of dictating.
4 of our board members are retired educators. So, Mr. Porter, on their behalf, do you have any thoughts on that? You're not ready to get back in the classroom, are you?
Actually, even Mrs. Nolan was a retired, taught for 2 or 3 years while she was getting her accounting degree. So all 5 of us have been in the classroom.
That's right.
Not just an administrative position, but it's in the classroom. So, it's important to us that we really, really protect. But virtual schools need to have the same standards that we have.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things I'd love to see happen to all of those virtual schools is that they have to meet the same standards that we do.
Mr. Porter, I'm proud of the fact that all 5 of our school board members have experience in Oklahoma's public schools in the classroom teaching. And I'm going to contrast that with the governor's recent attempt to appoint somebody to the state board who had 0 experience in Oklahoma classrooms. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get to closing remarks. Mr. Fugate, do you have anything that you'd like to add? I'm sorry, Representative Fugate.
Everybody who's watching can call me Andy.
All right.
Yeah. I'm proud to represent Mid-Del Public Schools out at the state capitol. I'm proud to be a voice for public education. My father was a teacher. My wife is a teacher. My older brother's a teacher. My mother's degree is in education. And I spend a lot of time in our classrooms because I feel like I owe it to the teachers and folks like Mr. Porter who were responsible for my education. I got a wonderful education in Mid-Del Public Schools, and I'm committed to make sure that this generation of kids has that and even more. So I mentioned this early on in the call, and I'll say it again. If you have ideas, if you see things that need statutory changes to help you in the classroom be more successful, send them my way. It's andy.fugate@okhouse.gov. andy.fugate@okhouse.gov. I would love to hear them. Let's turn those ideas into something that we can put into practice, and so that we can make the state of Oklahoma better.
Mr. Porter, do you have anything that you would like to add in closing?
I just appreciate Andy. He's always available, and I appreciate that. And we will be touching base with you and all the other legislators that represent our area to try and support the things that we feel like we need, especially our goals.
And again, I want to say thank you. And I hope everybody watching understands that there are just a lot of logistical challenges right now with getting people scheduled to even have a virtual forum like this. If I had it to do over, I would have done this maybe a couple of weeks ago when your schedule at the legislature had been a little less complicated. I would love it if all of our staff would be engaged with our legislative delegation. Again, just let them know I work in Mid-Del schools and you represent part of our district. If you live outside of the district, go to the legislature's homepage on their website, find your legislator and get engaged with them and say, I'm an educator. I work in public education. I'd like to, hear your thoughts on X, Y, and Z. And I can probably think of 20 or 25 non-education issues that I'd like to sit down and visit with my legislators about. And we actually have good conversations. And one of the things I like about the people who represent us in the House and the Senate right now, I can tell you, is that even when if I will text Andy or I'll text Representative Manger or Senator Stanley or whoever, anybody on this list, and say, this is my thought on a bill that you're about to hear. And sometimes they will disagree with me, and we have a respectful conversation, and that's the way it needs to be. I'm not looking. Actually, you know what? I would love it if all 11 people on this list agreed with me all the time. That would be great for our district. But we're not always going to agree, but we're not going to be disagreeable about it. And I think that's who we are as a community, and it should be reflected in the way that we work together as citizens and as representatives and senators. So again. Representative Fugate, thank you so much for joining us. And just Paul in the booth there, I want to say thanks for getting all of this put together, because we were expecting a little bit of a bigger crowd, but I got some last minute cancellations as happens. So we'll do this again sometime.
Have fun in your legislative sessions.
Thank you. We'll see you guys.
All right. Take care, everybody.